Dr. Sigward, you were saying that there's this learned disuse. So this side-to-side difference, we want them to focus on that, we want to address that early disuse. And then also Dr. Grooms talking about we want to try to decrease the cortical side of things, so we don't want to focus on that too much. I mean, I'm sure there's this progression, but how do we find that balance between giving them these cues so that they actually focus on it to actually use the leg, but then not encouraging that cortical pathway, and how do we try to find that balance and progression?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, and perhaps this is me telling you what you need to do with them versus this then translating 100% of what they need to do. Use your leg. You know, that you don't have to, that sort of feedback of use your leg during daily activities could be pretty general versus saying every time you get up out of a chair, I want you to concentrate on where your foot is and standing up and using your quads sort of thing. So I think there's definitely a continuum, and I think Dustin sort of highlighted this. First you need to be able to say this is the problem and we need to start to fix this, and then being able to incorporate that across different contexts with different stimuli, and simply having them do some of these things early on outside of the clinical practice, like thinking about doing this throughout the day, actually automatically incorporates a lot of different contexts. You know, the surface you're on, the surface you come off of, what you're, you know, where you're going and doing what you're doing throughout the day. So I think that can start that a little bit. But I'm guessing that Dustin will agree that some of this needs to start with this is a problem and this is how you need to fix it, and then we need to go from there.
Sure, and it's this is why you're all clinicians and you're all experts in movement, performance, and assessment. There is no defined criteria, and the patients I've worked with that I've tried to implement this therapy have all different learning rates. And so some people, like the second visit, I'm already having them do dual task on their quad set because they could do it. Some people it takes about 2 months, and you just start, you can't add them stem, but you just can't get it back. So you got to use your own clinical judgment. And what I find to be best to transition people to that implicit learning where they don't know what's happening is that external focus can be pretty powerful, where instead of having them attend, so even for the quad set, you just have them try to hit their knee to a bar you sit out, and you take the attention away. It's a very simple thing to do. What I find is my grad students are very creative. Once they get this idea, they just apply it to everything. Like, well, I had one student go, she bought like flashlights, put different color Kleenex on them, and she would just flash them on the wall, and one color would be like a straight leg raise, and one would be a quad set, and then she would progress it to like squat or lunge, and they had to constantly look and make a decision. So they found very unique ways to incorporate external focus therapy, but you progress them when you think they're ready. And there was a pretty interesting stroke study for gait, where they had people get vibration sensation if they weren't loading if they had to learn non-disuse where they weren't loading, say, hem creases. And it was a very strong vibration, and eventually they got it to be just Gaussian noise where you can't perceive it, but they were still correcting their movement when it came on, but it was below their perception, which was pretty fascinating longitudinal idea. So there is this idea that you can transition people from the feedback to extinguishing it and making it implicit. This one was a haptic study, it's a little different. But I would just conceptualize that you have to get people to this level in whatever way you can. You try to return their strength, or you try to turn their movement profile, or you have to have this motor learning adaptation too, or this neurophysiologic adaptation. So basically you take your normal therapy and you have this extra column. So you have one more thing to deal with, I'm sorry. But hopefully it makes an impact.
One, I saw a poster conference and I thought, genius, that is so simple and genius. It was some sort of assessment of balance using, you know, like a teeter-totter sort of thing. It was a pretty high balance with a half circle underneath it. Well, we have these in our clinic. We do balance exercises, but if you think about it, if one leg is on one side and one leg is on the other side and you're keeping it balanced, you've now just shifted your load evenly, right? So you think of that as a balance exercise, but implicitly they're keeping their load even on both. In that same context, I'm wondering if that front to back balance would be the same as well. So if you're able to keep whatever perturbation, balance perturbation, where both feet are doing the same thing anterior to posterior, again, you're starting to implicitly get them to maintain similar loading in those contexts. And that may need to be a very simple type of task early on when you're getting them to do these things or progressing to something like that. But that may, in a sense, be a really easy way to recalibrate in these really early, simple sort of learning tasks.
And I have a question for you. So we're talking a lot about bilateral tasks, squats, but all day long we walk around, we're talking about cutting on the field, running. Any thoughts from you guys on how much retraining these bilateral tasks, does it carry over to more, how that gait is a unilateral task, but it's certainly reciprocal and a lot different than a squat? Any preliminary data on that, or any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's tricky. That's tricky. So, and I put that gait data up there because we're looking at unilateral tasks as well. The first thing I say is, you know, a lot of data's come out looking at drop, jump tasks, right? And all the clinicians are like, I'm not going to do a drop, jump task in my class or with my patients. That's not, you know, athlete specific. You know, what are we going to get from this? Well, it is a task that has a certain demand on it, right? And we can get a lot of information out of that. And it may seem simple to them, and it may seem simple to you, but it does actually highlight some very simple things that are going wrong. So if we're going to look at bilateral tasks, and we see that they're avoiding loading their surgical limb, that seems like a really simple thing and a non-use sort of thing, but it's highlighting that even in a simple situation, they're choosing a motor pattern that is not what we would think is optimal. We get to a single limb task, and there's so much data out there too showing how these guys can accomplish single limb hop tasks, and they're not using their knee at all. They're really great at compensating at the other joints. How to avoid that, I'm sort of at a loss. We're working on looking at some gait perturbation stuff, but I don't think that that's always gonna be translating over into our higher level tasks. A recently PhD student looked at sort of a single limb loading task, little lower demand than running, so sort of leaping forward and back, and using measures of angular velocity of the thigh, we're able to actually isolate what's going on in the knee, which is really interesting, and this is not a study, this is very anecdotal, is using thigh angular velocity measures, comparing side to side. The deficit in thigh angular velocity predicted the deficit in knee power during this task. Very simple measures using these IMUs. Part of her dissertation was to be how can they use this information to train and improve knee power during this task. It got axed because just say this, it got axed. But in her pilot data, she put these inertial sensors on people, and they were doing this task, and they were comparing it, and they're like, okay, figure it out. Figure out how to get to 450 like you did on the other side. No other instructions on this, and they did figure it out. They were landing on their toe and then going down to flex their knee, and they weren't getting a very high angular velocity. And they figured out they needed to land on their heel, and they needed to load into this task and come back out. So having some type of joint-specific type of training for single limb tasks, 100% is going to be important. But I don't really have the answer